Welcome back to AM Agenda. Joining me now from Sydney, our panel of politicians, the Labor MP Jason Clare and the Liberal frontbencher Scott Morrison. Good morning to you both.
Good morning, Ashley.
Morning. Morning.
Well, as expected, it was a bit of a love-in between President Obama and Prime Minister Rudd at this meeting. They were both full of praise over each other's handling of the economic crisis. Here's some of what Mr Rudd had to say after that meeting.
And it's a first-class alliance, and it's a first-class partnership between our two countries. And the purpose of this visit is to reaffirm and to examine its future and to work on its future together.
Jason Clare, I guess it's not so exciting that these two leaders seem to get on so well when you look at the parallels between how the Rudd and Obama governments have gone about taking action over this economic crisis.
Yeah, it was a very important meeting, and both the President and the Prime Minister agree that we do need to take action on the global economic recession. That means stimulating our economies. Importantly, it means dealing with this issue of toxic debt that's infected American banks and European banks. And I think it's important to mention that Australian Prime Ministers and American Presidents have always had good and strong relationships. This is our closest and most important ally. We're not always going to agree on everything, but we're on the same page when it comes to tackling the global economic recession. And quite importantly, we've now got a President of the United States who's committed to doing something about climate change. And that's important because America is the biggest economy in the world and the second biggest emitter. And the world is not going to tackle the problems of the global economic recession or climate change for that matter if America isn't at the table. So this was an important meeting and a lot of good news came out of it.
Scott Morrison, what's your reaction to these talks? It seems like the leaders got off to a pretty good start.
Well, these are always polite affairs, and I agree with Jason. This is our most important alliance, and it's incredibly important that these relationships go well. This is a relationship, I should stress, that's just beginning. I wouldn't, at the moment, call it a special relationship or anything like that at this point in time. The nature of this relationship will be proven by what it achieves and what it does. At the moment, there are some courteous exchanges, is what you'd expect. I mean, I don't think you'd expect anything other than that at this point in the cycle. And there are some big issues on the table, and Jason mentioned one, the emissions trading scheme, and what the world's going to do about that, and whether Australia's going to go out there and advance to the rest of the world and put in place a scheme that's going to cost jobs and export emissions.
Well, back here at home, making headlines, yet another news poll showing that voters would prefer that Peter Costello led the coalition to the next election over Malcolm Turnbull. This latest poll showed that 46% of people backed Mr Costello compared with 35% for Malcolm Turnbull. Scott Morrison, is Malcolm Turnbull ever going to shake this ghost of Peter Costello while he still remains in Parliament?
I think the point here, Ashley, is that Malcolm Turnbull is the one doing the job. Malcolm Turnbull is the one facing up to the issues on a daily basis. He's the one who's making tough decisions, unlike the Prime Minister, whether it's on rejecting a stimulus package and putting forward an alternative which invests in economic infrastructure. He's the one that's actually part of the debate at the moment, and he's the one who's actually putting things out there. Now, when you're doing that as a leader, there are going to be people who disagree with you, and there are going to be people who agree with you. That's the price of leadership. And what we're seeing from Malcolm as our leader is a very strong leader who's prepared to take decisions and go out there and take positions, some of which have been unpopular, but are very much in the national interest. So in Malcolm, we're seeing a leader in action.
Ashley,
Scott, it's a pretty sorry situation, isn't it, when the opposition leader is up against A, a Prime Minister who's outpolling him 3-1, and B, when voters would prefer his colleague to take over the job, even when that colleague hasn't even expressed interest in the job.
Look, Malcolm Turnbull is no stranger to challenges. Malcolm Turnbull is someone who's fought against things all of his life. He's a very strong person. He's not intimidated by challenges. He's not intimidated by tough circumstances. He's someone who can face those tough circumstances. And right now, this country needs someone like that, someone who can make tough decisions, who can face adversity and can stare it down and see it through.
Jason Clare, Labor voters polled in this news poll also agreed that Mr Costello would be a greater threat to Mr Rudd than Malcolm Turnbull. Do you agree with that?
Well, I'm starting to feel sorry for Malcolm Turnbull. I agree with you. Peter Costello hasn't even put his hand up and he's already beating Malcolm Turnbull. Annabelle Crabb probably got it right in the Sydney Morning Herald last week when she said that it's like a TV show that gets beaten by the test pattern. A lot of people I've been speaking to around Parliament, a lot of Scott's colleagues have been telling me privately that they've switched their vote now from Malcolm Turnbull to Peter Costello, because at least Peter Costello stands for something. That's true. You do know where he stands. He stands for extreme workplace laws, which is very popular amongst a lot of Scott's colleagues. Opposed to that, you've got Malcolm Turnbull, who keeps flipping and flopping, changing his position on work choices, on the economy, on climate change. But all of this really is a bit of a sideshow. What's important are the meetings that are going on in Washington right now and the meetings that will happen in London next week at the G20. Australians think that this is a bit of a sideshow. They're interested in the world economy and how it affects Australian jobs and getting investment back here in Australia. And that's the government's focus. That's certainly the Prime Minister's focus.
Well, another focus for the government, of course, at the moment is coming up with the next budget. There's speculation that the government's considering means testing the Medicare safety net. Now, I don't expect you, Jason Clare, to know what's in or out of the budget, but do you think that if sacrifices are to be made, like the Treasurer has suggested, then this is one that could be made?
Spill the beans. Spill the beans. Spill the beans.
Well, I know one thing, Ashley, and that is that this is one of a million different rumours that'll be floated over the next 6 weeks. What's in the budget, what's out of the budget. We don't speculate about what's in the budget. Peter Costello didn't do that when he was the Treasurer, and of course that's the right thing to do. But what we do know is that this is going to be a very difficult budget. I think it's probably fair to say that this will be the toughest budget that needs to be crafted by the Australian government in the last couple of decades. The world recession, the global recession, means that revenues are down. It's already cut about $115 billion off tax receipts, and expenditure is up as we need to support people who have lost jobs through no fault of their own. And the guiding principle here when crafting a budget in these uncertain times is what can we do to support the economy and to protect jobs, to stimulate the economy, to ensure a soft landing for the Australian economy. That's got to be the priority when you're crafting a budget in these difficult economic times.
Scott Morrison, if this was an option, you'd think that it'd be a pretty unpopular one in terms of public opinion. Means testing could, of course, hit people undergoing cancer treatments, IVF, people that are already at a very vulnerable stage of their life.
Yeah, that's true, Ashley. I mean, I don't know what's in the budget, but I do know this. Debt's going to be higher, deficit's going to be greater. And why? Because this is the first budget where we'll see the Australian people having to pay back these exorbitant payouts that were made before Christmas and are being made now. Over $24 billion worth of payments is all going to have to be paid back, and they're going to be paid back in higher debt, higher taxes, higher charges, reduced services. That's what it all means. This budget is where the rubber is going to start to hit the road, and it's going to continue to hit the road for the next 12, 18 months, 2 years, as we have to pay back and deal with the economic legacy of the fiscal profligacy of this government in splashing cash around. I mean, take the payments. There are at least 3 snowy schemes worth of investments in these payments, and there's not one snowy scheme in there. The economic infrastructure is not there in this package, and we're going to have to pay it all back in higher debt and higher taxes, like slashing the Medicare safety net.
Okay, Scott Morrison, Jason Clare, we have run out of time. Thank you both for your insights this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley.
And do join us for PM Agenda this afternoon with David Spears. Kieran Gilbert, of course, will be giving us a lot more updates on Kevin Rudd's trip to Washington throughout the day as well. I'll be back with AM Agenda tomorrow morning. Until then, I'm Ashley Gillen. Thanks for your company.